Hello and welcome. We often talk about how capitalism is always moving forward, but what's really driving that change? Well, one economist, Joseph Schumpeter, had a pretty powerful answer. He didn't see it as a gentle evolution, but more like a storm, one that destroys old things to give birth to something new and better. Today, we're going to unpack his fascinating theory.
It all boils down to these two words, creative destruction. This is really the heart of Schumpeter's entire theory. The basic idea? To create something new, you first have to destroy the old. So let's explore what this really means and how it shapes the economy we live in.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start our journey by imagining a world where nothing ever changes. Then we'll introduce the spark that ignites everything, innovation. From there, we'll dive into the cycle of creation and destruction. And finally, we'll look at Schumpeter's really surprising prediction about the ultimate fate of capitalism itself.
Okay, so to explain his theory, Schumpeter starts from a really interesting, almost strange place. A hypothetical world where nothing ever changes. Just imagine a completely static, calm economic system. He calls this steady state the circular flow. Picture an economy where, year after year, the exact same goods are made in the exact same way. No new ideas, no profits, no savings. It's kind of like the blood flowing through our bodies. It just keeps going in a predictable loop without any ups, downs, or radical changes.
So, what could possibly break this peaceful, boring circular flow? What's the force that comes in and shakes everything up? For Schumpeter, the answer was simple and powerful: innovation.
According to him, real economic development isn't something that's imposed from the outside. No, it erupts from within the system itself. It's a sudden, major shift that can rattle the entire structure to its core.
And for Schumpeter, innovation wasn't just about inventing something new. It can be any one of these 5 things: creating a brand new product, finding a new way to produce something, opening up a totally new market, discovering a new source for raw materials, or even just reorganizing an entire industry.
And who's the hero bringing about all this change? The entrepreneur. Now, this isn't just a capitalist looking to make money. This is someone who directs funds towards a vision. They're driven by the desire to build a commercial empire, by the will to conquer and prove they're the best. But most importantly, they find sheer joy in just creating something new and making things happen.
So what happens when one of these entrepreneurs actually innovates? Well, it's not just a one-person show. It kicks off a massive wave that can reshape the entire economy.
Typically, an entrepreneur gets their idea off the ground using credit from a bank. And as soon as they find success, what happens? Others jump in to copy them, swarming around the new idea like bees to a honeycomb. Everyone wants a piece of that success.
This S-shaped curve you're seeing perfectly illustrates how an innovation spreads. Adoption starts off slow, then suddenly it accelerates rapidly as it gains momentum. But notice, it never quite hits 100%. Why? Because by the time it gets close, something new and better has probably already hit the market.
This rush to innovate and imitate pumps money and new jobs into the economy, creating what we call a boom. But it's always followed by a bust as the old products and outdated companies start to fail. And for Schumpeter, this cycle isn't a flaw. It's a necessary part of progress. And this cycle is always pushing the economy forward. As you can see in this graph, an innovation boosts output from point Y up to P. When a new technology comes along, output might dip from P to T, but here's the key. Point T is always higher than where we started at Y. So after every cycle, the economy lands on a new, better foundation. So every innovation creates what Schumpeter called a primary wave. But on top of that, you get a secondary wave, fueled by things like bank credit and speculation. It's the second wave that really exaggerates the cycle, making the booms feel bigger and the busts feel deeper, leading to those periods of prosperity and depression.
And this entire process, this constant churning cycle, is what Schumpeter famously named creative destruction. It's the simple, brutal fact that in order to create something new, you have to destroy what came before. Think of how smartphones wiped out the markets for standalone cameras and music players, or how Netflix made video rental stores like Blockbuster completely obsolete. This, Schumpeter argued, is the real engine of capitalism. But here's where Schumpeter's story takes a really surprising turn. He didn't actually think this engine of progress would run forever. In fact, his view on the future of capitalism was pretty radical.
So you'd think this engine of progress would just keep going, right? That this cycle of creative destruction would keep capitalism alive and kicking indefinitely? Well, Schumpeter's answer was a shocker. He flat out said,
Can capitalism survive? No, I do not think it can. He believed that capitalism would eventually be destroyed by its own success.
Why? Because he saw its success creating its own enemies. First, innovation stops being the work of a daring individual and becomes a routine, managed by teams of specialists in large corporations. Second, the desire to build a family dynasty starts to fade. And third, the very foundations of capitalism, things like private property and freedom of contract, get eroded by the sheer power of massive corporations.
Now, Schumpeter's theory completely changed how we think about economics. But is it a perfect theory? Of course not. Like any big idea, it has its critics. So let's take a quick look at some of the arguments against it.
Critics argue that Schumpeter's ideal innovator doesn't really exist anymore. Today, it's all about corporate R&D departments. They also point out that development can be a steady, continuous process, not just a series of cycles. And some say he put way too much emphasis on bank credit while ignoring other factors that cause business cycles.
On top of that, his theory doesn't apply very well to developing countries. Why? Well, because these nations often lack a strong class of entrepreneurs, their social and economic conditions are vastly different, and their development often comes from adopting innovations from elsewhere, not creating them from scratch.
So that leaves us with a final question to think about. Is our modern world, where giant tech companies can disrupt entire industries overnight, the ultimate proof of Schumpeter's creative destruction? Or is it the biggest exception, a world where innovation has become routine and a handful of giants rule everything? It's definitely something worth thinking about.